Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to One Fair Review, your one-stop source for media, entertainment, whatever it might be, because really we're so unfocused, we're not even sure what we try to do around here. But anyways, today we're talking about a movie. We're going to be reviewing a movie that people have been waiting for years, at least so I've been told, and a movie that I personally did not give a flying crap about watching in theaters, and that I really would have preferred to just miss out all entirely, but I'm a completionist, as you all know, so of course I was inevitably going to watch Star Wars, The Rise of the... what is it? This is Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. This movie came out a few days ago. It's making money. It has split reactions all over, critics hating it, or saying it's okay, fans loving it, or saying it sucks. Who knows anymore? Who knows with Star Wars? Star Wars is an amazing series that brings people together. But that being said, let's talk about the story summary. So the story goes as follows. The Resistance is around, and they are trying to do something. They're trying to stop the First Order, which is still a thing, despite everything being destroyed in the last movie. But they retconned the last movie, so nothing that happened in The Last Jedi really even matters anymore. And the Emperor shows up. Palpatine, he is at the beginning of the film, and Rey and Poe and Finn go on an adventure with C-3PO. Hijinks ensue, and people farted a lot in the theater, and one guy seemed to have mistaken the movie for a porno because he just kept saying "fuck yeah," "oh yeah" in the background of my seat, and the projector was broken. So there was a green spot the entire time while watching the movie, and the colors were muted. So the movie looked like garbage while I was watching it. And that's my story summary of The Rise of Skywalker. Academy nominees for Adam Driver as Kylo Ren, Daisy Ridley as Rey, John Boyega as Finn, Oscar Isaac as Poe Dameron, Anthony Daniels as C-3PO, and a bunch of other people. Literally everybody in the world is in Star Wars. You ever notice that? They just hire a bunch of actors to be in Star Wars nowadays. Just like, hey, just come be in a Star Wars movie. Who cares what you actually do? They get everybody. They got Billy D in this movie, which was very jarring to see. It made no sense, but they had him. So I guess I always start off with story when talking about movies, and I really don't know where to start with Star Wars. The rise of the rebellion, the rise of Skywalker, the rise of Skywalker. It's this movie's a mess. This movie is an absolute train wreck. It's a dumpster fire of a plot. Well, no, there is no plot. There is a collection of scenes that are strung together from action set piece to another action set piece, and that continues all the way to like the 2 hours and 2 hour mark of the movie. It just straight up action the entire time. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker has one of my least favorite elements in movies, modern movies nowadays, where there is very little plot, there is very little exposition, there's very little dialogue, but there is a lot of action, and it just keeps going from action to action to action. It happened with Aquaman as well. Aquaman had scenes of dialogue, which consisted of just periodic, like, this is exposition, this is the world, this is what's going on, this is what we're gonna do. And then it just explosion action scene. That's pretty much what Star Wars was here. Towards the beginning of the film, I was just desperately hoping for the movie to just focus on something, because the scenes just kept getting whoa, they kept getting mixed around, you kept getting thrown all over the place. It's cutting between Kylo Ren, Finn and Poe Dameron, and Rey, and it's like cutting in between all these characters who are not in the same place, and it's just so bizarre to see, and just quite frankly annoying and frustrating, because you as to start a movie, you really want to set up what's going on, and I think the original Star Wars movies do a great job at that. Even like The Return of the Jedi, which is the lesser, it does a good job at establishing what's going on. Hell, even the prequels do a decent job of following the rule of, okay, we need to set up where are we, what's going on, and let's move on from there. Very rarely does a Star Wars movie open with just straight action. And when they do open with straight action, it's always very calm action. It's very, down low. It's nothing particularly special. Whereas here, it's like they're like light speed jumping. I don't even know how that would work physically. I mean, I always assumed in Star Wars they had to input like destinations and then jump to it. But here it's just like they're just going crazy, going all over the place, and it's like it didn't make any sense. But okay, let's not harp on the beginning scenes of the movie. Let's harp on everything else. There is a complete lack of plot in this movie. There is a bunch of scenes strung together, and it's bizarre to say the least. These characters are given almost nothing to work with. And what I think is trying to go on is that clearly they're retconning The Last Jedi, and J.J. Abrams is trying to essentially make 2 movies in one. And I could definitely see that not working, but I could definitely see what he was trying to do. I could see where, okay, if he was to make the second movie, the first half of Rise of the Skywalker, okay, that would have been the second act of the movie. And I was like, okay, I can envision something good coming out of that. And then there's the third part, which like, okay, I can see something good coming out of that. But because it's an all-in-one movie, it's never given enough time to develop, and these characters don't know each other enough, and there's not enough development between the 3 of them, or the 4 of them, to where it actually works. So it's just bizarre, and he tries to correct this by having no character development, having really no emotional moments, and completely destroying emotional moments by lackluster editing. Now, I'm not going to give away any spoilers on the movie. I don't feel like doing that, but there are scenes that just don't work, and it's bizarre because it's like writing 101, editing 101, direction 101. These are like basic flaws in the movie where it's like, okay, this is not something that the audience should know at this point in the movie, and this isn't something that the character should know at this point in the movie. And when you undercut an emotional scene with a joke, it doesn't work because the emotion is then sucked out because, hey, you just removed it by adding a joke by the end of it. So there's many different scenes in this movie that just fell flat on their face because it's like we either know too much or we know too little, or they have a joke that just doesn't feel right. In terms of humor, there's barely any humor in this movie, except for C-3PO, and ironically, C-3PO was actually the star of the movie. I found him to be the most entertaining and had the funniest lines. And when C-3PO is the star in your Star Wars movie, you know you've done something wrong because that C-3PO has always been annoying. So I just don't know how they were. I don't know how they were so inept that they could not make the other characters as likable as C-3PO. But whatever. All this crap, like all these characters, like who cares at this point? I didn't like The Last Jedi personally. I thought it was okay. I mean, when I first watched it, I liked it just fine. I was like, hey, I expected nothing from it, and I got a little bit more. So I was like, oh, hey, it's not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. So I liked it. Years later, my opinions have changed. I don't particularly like the movie. And when it comes to The Force Awakens, I've always said the same thing about The Force Awakens. It's a good movie if the other 2 movies are better. But now that it's been years and years since 2015, and now that I've seen everything that they've done with the story, now The Force Awakens isn't that good of a movie because, well, they didn't really explore with the next 2, which is unfortunate. But hey, that's what you get for not planning ahead of time what you were going to do with your story and the characters and the arcs of the series. Watching this movie was just misery. I already mentioned that the projector was broken. There was some creepy weirdo behind me who kept, saying weird sexual noises towards Star Wars. It was really bizarre. And the movie all around wasn't that good, so it was a pretty lousy experience watching it in theaters, although I will chalk that up to I really can't judge the cinematography that much because the projector was broken. Yet again, might I add, this is a problem that I seem to be getting into quite frequently recently. But besides that, I think the movie looks pretty good, but the story and was just bad. It was just really bad. I'm not one of those people who's going to say it's okay, and I'm not a huge fan where I'm in denial, where I'm like, oh no, but it did something. No, the movie sucks. This movie is terrible. It's written by J.J. Abrams, who I remember him doing Star Trek Into Darkness, which I also hated. I hated that movie. It was terrible. And it's also co-written by the guy who did Batman vs Superman and Justice League. Of course, this movie was going to be terrible. I don't know if anybody thought that it would be any other way. And not even to mention Palpatine. Like, oh my God, Palpatine. It's not a spoiler. It's in the beginning of the movie. The way they reveal Palpatine is pathetic. And I think I would describe the whole movie as pathetic. There's a ton of fan service, and there was a certain point where I was watching it where I was just like, I'm done with Star Wars. This is infuriating to watch. And it's a shame, because I do legitimately love the Mandalorian TV show. I think it's a fantastic TV show. So I really was hoping, like, oh, maybe Rise of the Skywalker could be better. It wasn't going to, because I know who the writers were, but, maybe. You never know. Alright, next up, let's talk about presentation. Presentation for a Star Wars movie at this point is, I'm always going to say the same thing. It was pretty good. But the problem with that is Star Wars has this knack for, like, having, like, oh, let's clutter the screen with a bunch of creative, animatronics and puppets and characters and, like, all this weird, neat designs. And, back in the day, this was a very cute thing. It's like, oh, that's cute. Look at all that stuff. You don't look at it and, like, oh, look at the lore and the details. Like, that's not what Star Wars is about. Star Wars, the visuals before was always like, oh, look how cute it is. Look at this. It's so cute. But the novelty of having all these puppets and animatronics and all this set design, having all that on screen, the novelty has worn off for me, because I've seen it in all the movies that they have done so far. So that really doesn't make a difference for me anymore. Like, the movies can look good, but just because it looks good, that doesn't mean I'm going to like it anymore, because they've already proven, okay, you can make your movies look good, but what of it? I'm sure I can take a piece of shit and put all types of ingredients in it to make it look pretty, but at the end of the day, it's still a piece of shit, and I'm not going to eat it. And that's same thing with Star Wars. I watched this mainly just for the review and because I'm a completionist, but this doesn't make me excited to watch anything else. In fact, I'm pretty sure they're done with doing trilogies, and I wonder why. This movie's getting trashed for good reason. Like I said, the presentation is pretty good. I mean, it's a Star Wars movie. The CGI is good, the puppetry is good, the animatronics, from what I could tell, was pretty good. It's a Star Wars movie, and there are some neat visuals where I was like, ooh, that looks nice. But, I don't know. I just didn't care. Okay, let's wrap this up. I don't even know what to say. Like, this movie was horrible to watch. In all honesty, I was actually missing the prequels, which I'm not a fan of the prequels. I think they're horrible films, but at the very least, they're bad in a way where they're funny. You can laugh at how terrible the Star Wars prequels are. Like, there are some legitimately funny parts to it, and there's a certain charm and creativity to them that I was like, okay, I can buy this. Or the world, while the story, the writing behind it made no sense, it was terrible, there was awful dialogue, at the very least, I knew what was going on and I understood how the world worked. First movie makes a little bit of sense. It's like, okay, Naboo, they didn't pay their taxes, so the Trade Federation's in their legal right to demand payment, and they won't let the trade come into their planet unless they pay up. Naboo isn't doing that. Then they go to the council doesn't help them. Then Palpatine calls on a vote for no confidence to get rid of the Chancellor, so then he can be elected Chancellor. It's a horrible movie. Like, don't get me wrong, The Phantom Menace sucks, but at the very least, I knew what was going on. I knew what the world was. In Rise of the Skywalker, I was dumbfounded. Like, I just did not know what was going on. There was just cluttered, a bunch of characters. All this crap was on screen, and I was just like, what is this? At the end of Rise of Skywalker, there is the biggest fleet in galactic history essentially shows up. There is no build up to it. There is no like, oh, we got to go around recruiting people. None of that. There's nothing like Mass Effect 3 where you're going around trying to settle rivalries and do, kind of this cool, interesting stuff. Instead, it's just like the largest fleet in history comes up, and it's the largest fleet because they had the biggest budget, and people are like, whoa, look at all those people, like in the movie that is. And it's like, oh, this is supposed to be epic. This is supposed to be the big turning point, but instead it's just like, it's like, oh, whatever, because they never built up to it. It's just there. And I think that's the best way to describe Rise of Skywalker. It's just not epic. It's not it's entertaining, I guess. I mean, I was never bored because the pacing was pretty good. It was fast paced, and it's like, okay, it's not good, and there's no depth to it, but you know, at least I'm not bored. There was a few scenes I liked in the movie. I mean, I'm not gonna spoil anything, but there were a few scenes I was like, oh, that could work, or I think that works very well. Other than that, not much else. At the end of the movie, and this is going to be weird that I say this, I'm sure, but I was very disappointed to see that Finn and Poe did not get together romantically. And maybe, the group I went with, everybody said the same thing. There was some serious sexual tension between those two guys. Like, honestly. And their chemistry together was, I mean, it's great. The actors' chemistry with each other is so good where it's like, it's believable, where it's like, you know what? I want to see them together. I could picture them becoming, you know, romantically involved. They honestly reminded me of like Cameron and Mitchell from Modern Family, except Cameron and Mitchell are charming and hilarious, as in this movie they're just kind of bickering. But I don't know, I thought it worked and they didn't do it, and I was like, oh, but that would have made so much sense, and I honestly would have rooted for it. So, but I was disappointed. Of course, I couldn't even get a gay romance. Like, they didn't even give me that. Like, something so stupid that I never asked for. I was like, oh, I could see this working. They don't do it. Okay, whatever. I'm done. My final verdict for what's it called? The Rise of Skywalker is a 3 out of 10. I did not like this movie. I hated it. I was pretty miserable watching it in theaters. The story is terrible, and there's not much for me to like. There's really nothing for me to like. The special effects are kind of neat, but every Star Wars movie has good special effects, so whatever. The music was especially disappointing. They reuse a lot of music from the other Star Wars movies, and they reuse a lot of things to bring your nostalgia levels up, and it's pathetic. The movie's pathetic, and I never want to watch it again. I am done with Star Wars, at least Disney's Star Wars. I'm okay with watching the Clone Wars TV show or The Mandalorian. Just make TV shows, Disney. Just make TV shows, you know? That seems to be the best Star Wars experience I've ever gotten. Anyways, have you guys watched Star Wars? I mean, you probably have. Let me know down below if you liked it, if you hated it, if I don't care. Just tell me what you thought down below. I like reading your comments. It's always entertaining. Merry Christmas to everybody. Even though it's not Christmas Day, Merry Christmas to you all. I hope you all have a great Christmas. And as always, I'm Grant for One Fair Review, and I'll see you next year.